Anna is the editor of the Dominion Post and also the Wellington editor of Stuff. And Anna took up that role in October 2020 after returning from overseas, being 20 years living overseas. Please correct me if this is wrong, Anna. This is what the internet says. Anna was the foreign correspondent for the Washington Post from 2014 to 2020, serving as bureau chief in Beijing and Tokyo. She also worked for the Financial Times for 13 years and reported from countries like Iran, Syria, North Korea, and the USA. During 2013 to 2014, she was the Nieman Journalist Fellow at Harvard University, studying how change happens in closed societies. She is from Hastings, I understand, brought up in Hastings.
Yep. And
she's also received a number of awards, just a couple to highlight here. In June 2021, so very recently, she was awarded the Kia World Class New Zealander Award. That's from Kia. And also in 2018, the Shorenstein Journalism Award issued by Stanford University. So I'm sure there's plenty of other awards that we could mention there, but just a very brief introduction to you, Anna. And please, as I said, please correct any errors there. But welcome again, and we're really looking forward to hearing from you this afternoon. So the virtual floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Stephen, for the introduction. Everybody, your introduction was spot on, so no corrections needed there. It's nice to be here, if not in person, with you all virtually today. Excuse me for I might sound a little bit funny. I've just had COVID, so I'm all recovered, but I'm still a bit croaky. I haven't been smoking, I swear. So thank you for the invitation. I thought that maybe what I would do is just talk a little bit about why I decided to come home and what I want to do with the Dominion Post, or what I'm already trying to do with the Dominion Post and our coverage here. And I'll try to keep it relatively brief so we do have lots of time for questions and answers, because I think that is much more fun, the fun part. In 2020, I was working for the Washington Post in Beijing, covering this huge story, the battle between President Trump and Xi Jinping in China, and I've been running all around Asia, and I mean, I loved it. I loved being a foreign correspondent and being out in the world and getting to have all these adventures and go places, and having license to ask really, questions to everybody or strike up a conversation with lots of people. It was a really challenging and exciting job that I had for almost 20 years. It came with this kind of responsibility, right? Because I knew that in many of these places where I was, whether it was, North Korea or Iran or China for that matter, that I was going to places that very, very few of my readers would ever go to. So there's a big responsibility on there to write responsibly and completely about this place and convey the accurate picture back to the readers on the other side of the world. So for those 20 years or so, the being far away was the whole the joy of the job, in a way, being out. And I was really lucky to work for two very renowned and pretty well-resourced news organizations, and to have the resources to be able to travel with them at that time. But everything all of a sudden changed in 2020, and the pandemic was only a really small part of that. It was a part, but not the whole part. But at the beginning of 2020, the pandemic had erupted. I was running around China, reporting on this coronavirus, which at that stage was only in China. But at the same time, the trade war between President Trump and President Xi had erupted. And one day in March that year, 16 foreign correspondents, American correspondents, were expelled from China basically overnight. People who'd lived there for 20 or 30 years were given 5 days to leave. And I was not expelled because I was not American. So I was the only person left at the Washington Post or the New York Times at that time. But so things became extremely difficult inside China. Even though I was allowed to stay, it became really impossible to do any kind of independent reporting without being obstructed. And at the same time, lots of reporters who'd remained were coming under increasingly severe repression. So there's a Chinese-Australian journalist who was arrested in 2020. She is still in detention now, has had no access to her children or a lawyer, or she gets a visit from an Australian diplomat once a month, and that's it. So she's still there now, but then 2 other Australian reporters were warned, and they fled to their embassy in the middle of the night, and they stayed there for 5 days while the Australian government arranged their evacuation. So things became really serious, and I just thought it's not feasible for me. I'm a solo parent. I've got a relatively young child. It's not feasible for me to remain in China. So I was thinking of leaving, and I'd always thought I'd go back to Washington. But looking at Washington in 2020, it didn't seem so attractive anymore. And it's not just because of Trump, but because of Trumpism and the kind of toxic environment that had taken hold in Washington. So all of these things coincided with Sinead Boucher's decision in New Zealand to buy stuff for $1 from the Australian owner and to give it a new lease on life. And I didn't really know Sinead very well, but I remember her as a journalist, and I really believed in her commitment to journalism and to New Zealand journalism, and I really wanted to be part of the rejuvenation of this New Zealand media company. And so I made the tough decision in 2020 to swap Jeff Bezos and all his money for, well, a little bit of his money for Sinead Boucher and stuff. And I came home to be the editor of the Dominion Post and the Wellington editor of Stuff. And so that was obviously a big call, but I'm really, really happy to be home. It seemed like after being so far away for so long, I all of a sudden wanted to be close to my audience and felt this need to be part of a community and to be working for and with that community, and not to be far away anymore, not to be on the other side of the world from our readers, but to be, to know that I could be standing in the line at the supermarket and get accosted about a headline we had or something like that. So I just all of a sudden craved that proximity, and so it seemed like all the stars were aligning and the universe was telling me it was suddenly time to come home. And so it has been really good. The media environment in New Zealand is extremely tough. We're a very small country. We don't have those same economies of scale that the US or the UK or other countries have. So it is a challenge. I've got a pretty small team, and there aren't the kinds of checks and balances that there were when I left 20 years ago in terms of sub-editing and checking. And yes, the typos drive me as crazy as they drive all of the readers as well. And I'm on a big tear to try and get rid of the little mistakes. I keep saying to everybody, if we can't get the little things right, how can we expect people to trust us to get the big things right? So I'm always begging on about grammar and spelling and things like that. But I think, at Stuff, it's been really on a journey to try to look more like New Zealand. And so some of this has proven quite controversial, like the apology to Maori at the end of 2020, where Stuff newspapers apologised for 160 years of frankly racist coverage. That did lead to some cancellations, but I think was really the right thing to do, and for me really reinforced my decision to come home to be part of this media company that was trying to be inclusive and responsive to all New Zealanders. And in terms of what I've been doing in my team. I've been really trying hard to beef up kind of the public watchdog component of what we're doing and to hold the powerful to account, whether that is the Kapiti District Council or the government of the day, and to be really embarking on lots of rigorous reporting where we do ask tough questions. And increasingly, I've recently been on a campaign that we are running a list of all the tough questions, or any questions, in fact, that we ask that don't get answered. So now, because I've been really shocked as I came home to see how much obstruction there is from our officialdom. So yeah, so we're running unanswered questions every week, which the government really hates. Well, all authorities really hate being on that list of shame. So I'll definitely be keeping that up. But as part of an effort to, you know, to act as the representatives of the public, to ask questions to those in power. So we're doing that. But at the same time as doing this more traditional watchdog kind of journalism, the thing I've been really trying to do is to bring back some of the texture and some of the heart to our coverage, and to write about all aspects of our community, and to make sure that we celebrate the good things. I think that there's this, I mean, partly it's the media that often writes about the bad things and not about the good things, the media in general, the world over. But also I think there's a special New Zealand aspect in there of the, you know, famous, infamous tall poppy syndrome, and how we don't always celebrate people who are doing great things, and we should. So, and so, yeah, and so since I've been in this job, we've been running series, like we ran a series called World Class Wellington, where we wrote about businesses that are in the Wellington region that are doing really big things, especially with technology, and have developed a real reputation around the world. Like some of them are working for Google or Netflix or whatever, and they're like out of some old office building on Courtney Place. You'd never know. So we've been trying to celebrate them, trying to celebrate younger people who are overcoming challenges, but also trying to be seen that to be contributing to making our community a better place. And so one of the ways we've done that is I started a Christmas appeal at the end of 2020, where we profiled 4 or 5 charities in our region that were doing good things, and we raised like tens of thousands of dollars through that appeal. And we repeated it again last year with in conjunction with the Nikau Foundation, who is really excellent. And they suggested that we have a theme called Fostering Connection. And they went out and found 4 organizations in our community that were doing great things to foster connection, and I was really thrilled that one of them was Age Concern. And we had Stephen, I can't remember the man's name, but we had 2 people on our front page from Lower Hutt, who was an elderly man who was lonely, and non-elderly man, a middle-aged man, I guess, who was his buddy, and who would spend lots of time with him. And sorry, they weren't from Lower Hutt, they were from Tatahi Bay, and would go, and he would, so that his buddy would take him to the library or to Bunnings, or just provide that companionship. And it was a really lovely story, I thought, and we had the photo on the front page. And I remember emailing with Stephen afterwards, and he said, like, almost immediately, right, you had 36 people volunteering to be buddies for that program around the region. And I thought that was a really great example about how we can use our influence and our reach to do good, and to contribute to our community, and to be seen to be doing so. So things like that have definitely been the biggest highlight of this job, when I feel like we can make a difference in our community. So that's something we've been pressing ahead with. Also, when Age Concern was on the front page on this last Saturday, in fact, with the survey that you did of of your members during, well, the lockdowns and the COVID enforced restrictions and things, of how that loneliness is settling in again and how it's forcing people to stay inside, and what that means. So yeah, so we're trying across the board to show different people's experiences and different reactions to the same situation. And I think in that way, we can increase understanding and share different perspectives and be more representative of the whole of our community. So, so that's something I love doing. I guess the other thing I've been trying to do here is, I mean, we're the Wellington newsroom, so we're focused a lot on this region, of course. But I really think that a newspaper and a news website can be a forum for discussion and ideas. So I have been trying to generate lots of discussion about Wellington, because it's a bit, I was a bit sad to come back to Wellington and see all of the buildings that are closed for earthquake strengthening, and and obviously now all the bureaucrats are working from home, and it's a bit grim on the streets out there. And that's without even mentioning all the sewage that's flowing through the streets when the pipes explode. But so to try to discuss how we can think bigger and dream for what Wellington's future could be. So at the end of last year, we had a series on reimagining Wellington, where we profiled a bunch of cities around the world that had overcome challenges that Wellington now faces, like Melbourne, how it overcame inner city crime, and how Seville in Spain built these bike lanes cheaply and quickly. And so just to try to spark idea and to look outside of our borders as well, because obviously I liked being in the world. I think we can learn lots of things from the outside world, but I think also that COVID has made little New Zealand a little bit more insular as well, because nobody's traveling and things. So trying to apply lessons from abroad and what we can learn here in New Zealand. So I've got all of these irons in the fire on the go, trying to do more I guess thoughtful journalism. I think that's probably the biggest challenge and the biggest kind of guiding principle for me now, and that over the years of decline, New Zealand journalism tended towards sensationalism and clickbait and some things that weren't very constructive for us. And so how do we reverse that, or how do we get back to a place where we can produce trustworthy journalism, which I think is even more important than ordinary times, given that we have been in a pandemic, that conspiracy theories have run rife, that Facebook is spreading misinformation and disinformation. That I think this shows that good quality, serious journalism can literally be a matter of life and death when you're in a global health crisis like a pandemic. But so trying to reinstate some of the old trust in journalism and how we can do that. And that is really not easy, but I think that by being sober in our coverage, that we can, and citing all of our sources and things, we can show that, that there is still a place for trusted, careful journalism, and that hopefully we will become, well, we already are, but hopefully we'll become even more of a destination for New Zealanders to come to and find information that is fair and balanced and, told in a very straightforward way. So that's our mission. It's a lot to do, but I'm trying my best to do that, and I'm really so pleased to be part of this team. Nobody goes into journalism for the money, that's for sure, but there's a team of journalists here who choose to be in journalism even though they could earn much more in another job, because they have this sense of mission and they believe that it's really important for New Zealand, for a thriving democracy, to have a strong fourth estate. So I'm really thrilled to be part of this team, and I was particularly thrilled with the way they reported on the protests in Wellington over the past month. And that was, it was pretty grim out there as well. The reporters getting assaulted and verbally abused and having their phones smashed and masks ripped off their faces and things, but they kept on going out there to report on what was happening at the protests so that they could show New Zealanders what was happening there. But also we talked to the protesters. We tried to understand what would make them go and live in a tent in the pea straw and use a portaloo for 3 weeks. Like, what is it that they felt so strongly about that made them want to do that? So I think that's also really important for increasing understanding, is to try to understand what would motivate those people to do that. So that's a quick run through all the various things, or the main things that I've been trying to do in this job. So let's go to questions, I think, because that's much more fun, and then you can throw anything at me that I haven't already answered.
Well, thank you, Anna. That's great. Really appreciate that. Some fantastic insight, and I've been scribbling down a whole bunch of notes. And I'm gonna do the first question, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Could you just outline your day-to-day? It's a very simple question. Your day-to-day role. What's a typical day for you? What does it look like at the Don Post and stuff?
Yeah, so we are staffed. Our first reporter comes on at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the last reporter finishes at 10 p.m. We do have an overnight reporter for all of stuff. So I usually get in about 8:30. I mean, I've already read the paper and done things before I get here, but I get in about 8:30, and then we have a 9 o'clock news meeting where all the reporters talk about what they're going to do for the day. So that's our main meeting for discussing ideas. Either me and the editing team will come up with ideas, or reporters will put forward ideas, and that's how we set the agenda for the day. And then often I'll do talks like this, or I'll have meetings at various places around Wellington. And then we have at 2 o'clock, we have another meeting. It's happening now. That's a national meeting where everybody from all of Stuff's offices around the country goes on a call and talks about what the big stories are that are coming for the rest of the day. And then at 3 o'clock, we have a meeting to plan out the newspaper for the next day. So to decide what goes on the front and which parts go where. So there's a lot of planning involved. So this morning I've sent out instructions for a story I want in Saturday's newspaper. So I'm getting all the reporters to do their bit now. So we're all planned in advance. So there is a lot of planning and a lot of meetings. But the thing is, we have to be really nimble, because things will happen at 8:30 at night, and we have to be responsive in terms of both getting a story on the website. But if it's on the front page, or if there's something that needs to change in the paper, we are able to change that as well and rip something off the front page. So usually the front page goes at about 9:30 on a normal night. So usually at about 9 o'clock, I log onto my computer and see the pages and see how things are looking, and I might have some suggestions, but usually I just check it at that time. But I think that Prince Philip died at about 9:25 or something. We got the thing, and so that was on a Friday night for us, and so we were able to tear a story off the front page and put that on at that time. But after 10 o'clock, that's it, it's gone. It's web only. Yeah.
Okay, just a reminder, if you have a question, do you want to put it in the chat box? There's a few questions in there.
Yep.
One is, where do you see stuff in 5 or 10 years? And also yourself, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years?
Thank you, Lorna, for your question. I think stuff will still definitely be going strong. I mean, 5 or 10 years in particular is a really long time in journalism. Who knows how things will develop. But I think that I do think that there is a place for quality journalism, and that people will pay for quality journalism. So I think that stuff will continue to thrive. Whether the Dominion Post as a newspaper is still being printed in 5 or 10 years, I don't know. It's become like readership of a printed product is declining across the world. Also, newspaper is becoming more and more expensive. There's a distribution cost. So maybe we'll get to a stage where there's no more printed newspapers. I think that's possible. I would put that at the 10-year end of things rather than 5. As for myself, I have no idea. I've never planned anything in my life whatsoever. Like, things have always just unfolded, or one opportunity's led to another. So I'm sure that I will still be a journalist in 10 years because I don't know how to do anything else. But where it is and, what role I'm doing, I have no idea, but definitely still in journalism. Yeah.
Great. Do you have specific reporters for specific topics, or are they all general reporters?
Yep, we have specific reporters for specific topics. So in my team, I've got 22 reporters. The political gallery is separate, so press gallery is separate. So the political reporters are all down at Parliament. And there are general reporters who belong to Stuff as an organisation and will write lots of breaking news and feed that to the website. But in my team, everybody has a round. So we have one person who does Wellington City Council, one person who does transport, health, what else have we got out there? Education, Hutt Valley. So we have lots of reporters who concentrate on a specific area, and so their job, the health reporter is always out at one of various hospitals or talking to medical experts and things like that. So they are developing expertise in their area and really concentrating on those areas. So they are being specialist reporters in that way, but they can all be called on if something, like all of them were going down to the protest, or they might, if there's some big event that happens, like today, one of our reporters is covering the marine accident up in Northland, because Auckland is so busy with all of the rain and the disruption there. So anybody, we're very nimble, so anybody could be co-opted by or seconded to work on another story for another newsroom. So they say journalists are generalists, and so that's very much the case with us here. So I can see some other, can I just run through these other ones that I can see? But this one's a bit, Mick called his question about, are we going to expand our agriculture reporting? I'm really conscious, Mick, that we are light on that. On Stuff as a website, we do have, we actually just in the last few weeks, they've hired a new agriculture reporter in the business team. And so he is writing about farming news and that kind of thing, and he will do more and more of that. The problem is that the newspaper is gotten quite thin, and so often days we have only one page for business or 1 or 2 pages for business, and so our business team produces much more news that can be fit into those pages. So we have to be selective about what goes on those pages, and we often try to throw things forward. So we will run stories which haven't been online yet, so you're getting something new on those business or on any page. But also we are a urban, capital city newspaper, so we probably do tend towards corporate stories and things rather than business news, agriculture news. But I am conscious of that we should be doing better on that. And I'll just answer the other question here from Kathy, who says she can't access the Dominion Post on Press Reader. Where is Kathy? I'm looking for her. So there was a problem. It wasn't our problem. It was Press Reader itself. They got a cyber attack. So they got a global outage that lasted like a week or something. So all the Press Reader services around the world were disrupted. But that was fixed about a week ago. So it should be working again now. So if it hasn't, maybe you can let me know and I will see if I can fix it, because it must be specific to you now.
There's another question just come in. If you had to choose one other location that you enjoyed working with the most, in, where would that be? Why?
I mean, the place if I just wanted to live there, I would choose Rome. I would love to live in Rome and just wander around writing nice stories about life in Italy. And they actually created that job with the Dominion Post, at the Washington Post. Not that I wish the Dominion Post had a Rome correspondent. And so the person who got that job used to do my old job in Japan. So I was thinking, oh, maybe I could follow in his footsteps one day. Probably not anymore. But I think for news coverage, I was based in Iran for a while, and that was really amazing and so fascinating. And, it's such a multifaceted story, and there are hardly, and of great global importance, but there are hardly any journalists there. So I think I would choose to go back to Iran and write on what's happening there. Great question, though.
Great. I think that's most of them in the chat. If you've got another question, just let me know in the chat. How many languages do you speak? Do you take translators with you?
Yeah, so I can speak French, but I've never used it for work. My Korean, I lived in Korea for 4 years when I was in my 20s. So I had some brain power left and lots of time, no family commitments. So my Korean was pretty good. When I left Korea, I could do my own interviews and have conversations and things. But I haven't really maintained it. But I kind of speak a little bit of lots of languages. I speak some Japanese. I was working pretty hard on my Chinese. And I could understand quite a lot of Chinese, but my accent was really terrible. His Chinese has 4 tones. And I had no ear for it. So my 9-year-old son would correct me all the time for that. So yeah, so I would try to learn languages as I went places, but for lots of things that are very technical, then yeah, I would have a translator with me to help. Also, like when I lived in Japan, even when I did an interview in English, I would take my Japanese researcher with me to kind of do English to English translation, because so much of it is cultural, and I would ask a question, can I do something? Can I go visit that nuclear power plant? And the person would be like, maybe. And then my researcher would be like, that means no. So just even things like that to be able to provide kind of context and guidance on things. So it's always good to have local people around. The main problems in Wellington right now, that's a big question, Roy. I think the big problem is that there's a lack of leadership, that Wellington faces many problems, many of them not of their own making really, or not of the current leaders making. And that, look at the earthquake, damaged like all of Civic Square. So many big buildings around town are just empty, and that does give a sense of blighted streets in a way. It's quite depressing to see all the boarded up buildings. And this all dates back to the Christchurch earthquakes, but whereas Christchurch obviously had this catastrophic event and the chance to rebuild lots of things in one fell swoop, Wellington's been much more of a slow burn. And so there hasn't been that. There's like, the thing that drives me crazy is looking at Civic Square, where there are all the buildings around the outside, which have been red stickered over a period of time. But instead of using this as an opportunity to rethink this whole area and think about how can we reimagine what this central precinct could be like, and how do we make it a 21st century kind of space, it seems to be very piecemeal, one building at a time, without that overall vision. But it's a political town, and a lot of these issues are very political. The infrastructure things, all of it costs money, of course, but I think there's been a lot of waxing and waning on these issues, and instead of I wasn't here during the Kerry Prendergast years, but lots of people say, she may have, she was very decisive about getting things done. So I think that that's what Wellington needs, a sense of progress, and a sense of vision that everybody's working towards, which it doesn't have right now.
Okay, we'll take, there's a couple more. Restrictions in the Middle East. Were you subject to restrictions in the Middle East, like clothing and reporting restrictions, anything like that?
Not really. Like in Iran, yes, I mean, I had to wear a headscarf and a long shirt or long coat, but that was kind of like no big deal. I think, in fact, like people think it must be tough to be a female reporter in these places, but I think it was actually, it got me into lots of places where male reporters aren't able to go. So being able to go into private houses and speak to families and go into, in private spaces is difficult if you're a man, but much easier if you're a woman, I think. So I don't think, I think I faced kind of sexism much more in Korea and Japan, these very socially conservative places, or like Confucian places, hierarchical places, than I ever did in the Middle East. So I didn't think it was particularly restrictive. So it was fine.
Okay. Let's take one more, and then I've got a final one. Do you think Let's Get Wellington Moving will ever get moving?
Slowly. I think, again, this is one of these situations where there seems to be so much consultation and back and forth, and there's so much division about what should be done. And so, any day of the week you can read the letters to the Dominion Post and you'll see people saying, bikes aren't any use for us, we all need cars, we need more parking spaces, we need free parking. People who say pedestrianize the whole lot, we can make the change for climate change and that kind of stuff. So I think, again, that's another situation where there's just this endless consultation and no big vision there. And that when you look at lots of European cities that have light rail or mixed use roadways, I think that they work well. So I think they'll eventually get there, but I worry that the technology will be overtaken by the time they decide on it and build it. I mean, also things just take so long here. We've been on a tear about Transmission Gully, which is years overdue, decades in the making. So I'm not quite sure why that is. Can I quickly ask Dave's question from Ginny?
Yes.
Is there a reporter for older people? Yes, we have a social affairs reporter, and so his job is to write about different communities. So he will do like young people, millennials or whatever, but also different ethnic minorities in our region, but also he's the one who we would go to if there was something to deal with age concern or elderly people. It's his round to do social affairs, but we also have another reporter who does neighbourly and community news, and he often does those, and he writes obituaries as well. He often does those stories. So we do.
Cool. Last question from me. I left something out of your bio at the start, and that's that you've written a book called The Great Successor about Kim Jong Un. Do you want to tell us what drew you to write that, and what obviously something draws you to North Korea? Because you've been to North Korea? Yeah,
like a dozen times, more than a dozen times. I was posted to South Korea in 2004, and I was unusually lucky, maybe because I'm a New Zealander, at getting into North Korea a lot of times. And I thought that the system couldn't survive another transition from one Kim to the next. And then I went off and went to other countries and things. But then when I returned to Asia for the Washington Post, I covered North Korea again. And so it was more like I wanted to try to figure out how this unqualified 20-something had managed to defy all the predictions and keep North Korea intact as a totalitarian state. So I set about trying to report that out and to show it's not really a biography because nobody can write a biography about Kim Jong Un. We don't know enough about him, but to try to piece together all of the information that was available about Kim Jong Un, and to try to show who he is as a person and what's motivating him. And especially, I think, too, there was a perception that he's crazy, that he's this irrational tyrant. I mean, he's definitely a tyrant, but I wanted to show that he has, in fact, acted very rationally and very strategically for somebody who wants to keep a grip on this dictatorship. And so that if we treat him like a joke, we're underestimating him and the threat that he poses to the outside world, but also to the people of North Korea. So I tried to put together all the information that we had about Kim Jong Un. So so that book came out in 2019. It's the first biography-ish of Kim Jong Un, and now it's in 24 languages. The Spanish edition just came out, which is good.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So I look forward to updating it when something major happens in North Korea.
Yeah.
Whatever that may be.
All right, that's fantastic. Thank you, Anna. Just as a closing, I'm going to pass over to Lynn Crossland. Lynn's our companion walking service coordinator, and she's based in Wellington, and she's just got a couple of words to say thanks.
Hello, Anna. Just like to thank you very, very much indeed for a really interesting talk. It's just been fascinating listening to all your stories, and we can't thank you enough for giving up your time today. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, everybody, for having me on. And yeah, please keep reading Stuff or the Dominion Post, whatever you do, or your eyeballs make a difference. So thank you.